Hello everyone, watch this review here where they look at the Shocker Toys, Indy Spotlight, the Max series, Comic Book Heroes, Shadowhawk. It's a whole bunch of titles. Now this is the first Shocker Toys figure that I've reviewed that I'm aware of. So let me just say a quick few words about the packaging here, which is unbelievably cheap. If you look, it's got this sort of half glam or whatever thing going on, where it's kind of affixed to the card. I don't know, it's sort of similar to what they do with some of the more recent lines, like the modern incarnation of the Marvel Legends. But instead of just having it go part of the way, it just goes up the whole package, which, I don't know, makes it look even cheaper than it otherwise should have. For those of you not familiar with the character, it's one of those 90s sort of edgy, controversial shock titles. I basically learned about it because back in the 90s, around that time, I was frequenting a comic book store, which would toss a whole bunch of titles that didn't sell well, or if they ordered too much of it, into their clearance bin, which was either a quarter or 50 cents or something. So that's also how I got into Spider-Man 2099. But a little bit of a read up here in the back. After a tragic scuffle with gang members, Paul contracted the HIV virus. No, that's not even the case. It was a hit. This guy didn't like it. He wasn't playing ball. He was a district attorney. So this one guy sent a hitman for a bunch of hit guys, I think it was, and they injected him with a needle containing HIV-infected blood. So it's actually a sort of creative way to perform a hit, but it's kind of nutty. It also doesn't mention the fact that all of his coworkers reacted incredibly negative to the whole HIV thing. I think he ended up losing his job or something, so yeah, he had a lot of reasons to sort of go vigilante on these guys. So he got himself a superpowered exoskeleton and went out and kicked the crap out of criminals, sort of like a Batman analog of sorts. Well, sort of 90s Batman analog. Okay, John Paul Valley, or that's his name, the Azrael Batman. But as for the other figures in this series, probably not gonna pick up anything else. They never follow the Max. I don't know who Kabuki is. Scott looks interesting. I mean, if I did find that cheap, I probably would pick it up. And speaking of cheap, I actually found this for, I think it was $2 on Amazon, 5 shipping, so not a bad price by a stretch of the imagination. But hold on a second and I'll get him a pack. So, package design by the Third World Studios. So tacky, they put their little logo or whatever on the packaging. Yeah. Sort of a low budget series. Oh, but supposedly Shocker Toys will be doing a bunch of anime inspired characters. I've already pre-ordered the Nico Robin, so yeah, I'm getting off tangent. Before I go any further, I just want to say that even the inner blister just somehow reminds me of, a much older figure rather than, something coming out today. Now, Shadowhawk comes with 2 accessories. The first is, I think it was called an is. So, when I said the first is, that pretty much finishes the sentence. I believe it's something to do with the Max, in that alternate world, Outland or something. Yeah. It's kind of neat. Each of the figures in the wave comes with one. I guess if you get all of them, you have a little his army or whatever going on. The second is this weapon here, which I don't quite recall, but it looks kind of like a grappling hawk. Get it? Grappling hawk instead of hook. I'm so funny. But no, seriously, no real recollection of this, and then it looks kind of funky because it's more of a solid thing rather than, say, rope or even a cable. So, yeah. But it attaches right to his wrist if you want it to. I don't think I will be displaying him with it, although I expect I'd probably lose it if I don't. First thoughts on the figure. The paint quality leaves a lot to be desired. It just looks like a really sort of cheap, low-grade paint. There's also no gloss or finish attached to the figure or applied to the figure. It's also kind of weird because when you're looking at it, it looks like even the black portions are also paint, whereas most figure companies today use the cast plastic and they just paint over the portions that are the different color. So, I mean, I guess I could give them points just for going out and painting in the other portions as well, but at the same time it all kind of looks somewhat cheap. Now the shoulder guards or shoulder pads are removable. Unfortunately, they come off way too easily. I end up dropping it and then losing it, and that's why I'm reviewing the figure like 5 days after I initially opened the package, because it took a while to find the stupid shoulder pad again. The design, kind of different. In particular, I do like the physical balls used on the ankles here. Maybe it's not quite... Yeah, it is just a physical ball. So you get pivot in addition to some forward back, although the forward back is going to be extremely limited because it's on a physical ball and doesn't have a lot of clearance there. It's kind of a nice way of doing it, but at the same time, you do lose out on some articulation. Other sort of neat joint is here on the hip, which I guess is kind of a T-joint because I think the joint goes physically across. But I mean, it doesn't look quite like anything I've seen before. It looks like a split and then with an additional outwards, so it's kind of like what they do on the DC Universe Classics, but the joint doesn't look remotely like it, because it's more of a sort of different cut there with a, I think probably rod or whatever for rotation. So yeah, definitely very different. Unfortunately, some of the other joints are a bit more standard, not as exciting. In general, you know, kind of a disappointing looking figure, but, you know, is anything quite as good as you remember it? I imagine the comics probably aren't all that grand nowadays anyway, so. Although I do want to kind of go back and just read the ones I have, just to see if my memories do sort of hold up. In terms of scale, he's roughly the size of a Marvel Legend. Just bringing in Dawkins from the new line here. So yeah, figure stands fine, just takes a little while to sort of get a pose going. Unfortunately, joints are a little bit weak in the knees in this one, which is just the whole general issue. In terms of detail, the belt is really neat looking. It's got a sort of different paint as well. It's a white paint with sort of a pinkish red wash to it, which is really cool. The other thing is the actual shape of the pouches or belt is pretty neat. It's sort of going out a little bit. I don't know, something about it kind of reminds me of like crafting something in clay. Again, you know, these armbands or these shoulder pads kind of drive me crazy. They pop off way too easily. Rest of the sculpt, I don't know. If you look at the head here, something about the eyes just kind of bugs me. Can't recall if that's how it actually looked head on, but I do need to go back and actually look at the comics. I mean, beyond that, it just doesn't look like the head's long enough for some reason. Yeah. Could just be my mistake. And otherwise, you know, kind of a basic looking sculpt. The feet are a little bit different. It's got kind of an up curve here, which sort of works if you're posing the character like he's standing on his toe, because the toe's kind of out, which largely replaces the need to give actual toe articulation. Well, it doesn't so much replace, but at least facilitates movement on the toe. In terms of articulation, quick run through here. The head is on what I believe to be a physical ball, meaning you get some side-to-side motion here, which is neat. Some forward back, a lot more forward than it does back, which kind of sucks. Shoulder is ball jointed, but it's impeded by the shoulder pad, although the shoulder pads can come right off. Especially a little bump just going around the pec. If you notice, the bicep cut is actually right along the shoulder here, so you get rotation there without having sort of awkward looking joint, which I guess is kind of neat, but at the same time, yeah. The sort of stupid thing is, if you look at the elbow joint here, they didn't bother doing anything in for this. Typically when figures give us those joints, they have like a little indent here, just to make the joint look a little bit more natural when it's out. This lacks it, so it's just got this sort of, I don't know which I prefer. I would sort of go towards the norm, but I believe they also do this on a few of the Japanese figure lines, like the Figuarts. As far as I can tell, you only really get rotation at the wrist. I mean, I think it's on a physical ball again, but it's kind of difficult to know. I broke the wrist almost right off, so I've been careful not to really mess around with that too much. I meant to leave the video with that, but in the 5 days that it took to find the stupid shoulder pad, I completely forgot. So I mean, just be really careful. I don't think the plastic they use is particularly great. You have rotation as well as forward back on the torso joint. Really good range. You can go a full 360 in addition to a fair amount forward back. Then you have a similar joint down at the waist. So again, lots of forward back rotation, although this is a bit tougher to do a 360. The joint is as mentioned. I mean, it's got forward back, then it's got outward. Then you also have rotation, though not a lot of rotation. So I mean, it's definitely something a little bit interesting, whereas the upper body is a bit more standard. Double pin joint here at the knee, and then the ankles on a physical ball. All in all, I'm not impressed by the quality here. The paint is way too cheap. Wrist broke almost immediately. I'm not sure if it was just that it was sort of fixed in place with the paint and then I turned it too hard, or if it just wasn't a good fit for the peg hold. I don't know. All I know is, it's got like maybe another fraction of a millimeter left before it snaps off completely, so I can't really move the thing. Now, while this doesn't have forearm rotation, it's something you'd kind of expect just because they have the band sort of set up for it, so I'm not going to fault them for not giving us the forearm articulation, but at the same time, I'm just going to comment I wanted to see forearm articulation. Otherwise, I guess it's kind of a decent figure. The sculpt is serviceable. I don't know, it does the likeness some amount of justice. Only other downsides, just these shoulder pads which don't stay on. But I mean, it's something that I'm just happy that I picked up at a much cheaper price, because I don't feel this is worth the sort of usual. I think it was originally out for like 15 bucks. And I'm kind of hoping that this isn't going to be the level of quality that we see on the stuff going forward. Although I know that they've done other figures since this. I think the Tick was in a later series. That one I actually want to pick up. I haven't gotten around to it yet, and I think it's kind of expensive at this point. Like in the 40 range. But yeah, this has been a look at Shadowhawk from the Shocker Toys Indy Spotlight Comic Book Heroes Max series. Yes. I mean, it's okay if you're a fan of the character. You might get something out of it. Otherwise, probably not worth picking up. But until next time, folks.